Aubrey, would you say you are an IELTS writing expert?
I am an IELTS writing
You
expert.
are.
I'm excited
Yeah.
to get into IELTS writing today. We get by far more questions about writing than any other exam. And from talking to students, I know this is sort of the most intimidating exam. It's difficult to conquer to get that 7 or higher that you need.
And without knowing exactly what the examiner is looking for, it can be a mystery as to how to actually do this well, right? How do I get a
Right.
7 or higher if I don't know what I'm graded on? So, guys, if you have missed some of the recent episodes, we're actually doing a bit of a series right now, right, Aubrey?
Exactly. We have been seeing a lot of questions online in forums that don't always have correct answers. Like some of it'll be close to the truth, but not quite right or maybe outdated. IELTS has changed some over the years. So we're
Sure.
pulling some of these questions and providing you with answers you know you can trust.
Exactly. So, if you guys have missed the recent episodes about this, scroll up, check out IELTS Energy 1482, IELTS Q&A from reading forums, and check out IELTS Energy 1480, recent IELTS forum listening questions and expert answers. And if you guys have missed those episodes, that means you're not following IELTS Energy. So hit follow right now so you never miss an episode.
Yes, we have 2 new episodes every week, strategies for the IELTS exam, vocabulary, sample answers. You don't want to miss a single episode, so be sure to hit follow right here.
Awesome. All right, let's get to the first question. This is a lengthy question, guys. So we'll just sort of take it bit by bit here because there's a lot of good information to give you guys. All right, Aubrey, can you let us know the first part of that question?
Yes, they said, "Hello, I'll be taking IELTS Academic soon, and I'd like to clarify some queries that I have regarding Task 1 and Task 2." So, first, we'll read this Task 1 question. I went through some of the online resources and I realized that there may be times when there will be a combination of data, for example, a table and a bar chart, or a line graph and a pie chart. In these situations, do we describe the data separately, for example, one paragraph per chart, or do we attempt to draw links between the two sets of data?
This is a great question and a very common question, and our answer may surprise you guys. Aubrey, what would you tell this student?
Yeah, this is really interesting. If you know the scoring system, you are aware of what the examiner is looking for. They're looking for you to be aware of the key information in both of these charts, and that must be in your essay. So, depending on these graphs, they might be showing the difference between one point in time. They might be showing how time changed over a period of time, how information changed. That is going to affect how you report information. That is going to affect the information that you include. And the examiner is looking for you to make comparisons. That is right there in the instructions. And I mean, when you have two sets of information, it makes sense that you are going to be sharing, how are they different? How are they the same?
So, in to answer the students' questions, though, should they write about each graph in a separate paragraph, or do they have to write about them together in order to make comparisons?
So, the easiest thing to do is to write about each graph in its own paragraph. We suggest a strategy of just drawing a line between these graphs, separating information into two sections. And then each of those sections of information, each of those graphs, you describe in its own paragraph. This is the simplest, easiest way to describe this information.
Because in fact, guys, there usually is no connection. I mean, there's usually not something that you could say that links the two graphs to each other. They're normally, guys, they are presenting two completely different sets of data. Sure, they'll be linked to a topic, like maybe the first is a bar chart about men and women who competed in the Olympics. And then maybe the second one is about, countries and their medal numbers in the Olympics. So yeah, they're both providing information about the Olympics, but there's no sort of overarching or overall connection that you could make, correlation, right? Students are always looking for correlations between the graphs, and usually, guys, There is none. And if there is a correlation between the separate graphs, it's going to be obvious. You're going to catch it. And in that case, guys, just put the correlation in your overall trend. Okay, that's it. That's all you have to do. And then still follow our strategy of writing about each graph in a separate paragraph. That's the only way to have it very clearly organized so you get a high score for cohesion coherence.
Yeah, this makes your whole process much easier. You separate the information and then you're looking for the key numbers, right? Highest, lowest. What information is the examiner going to expect to see in your essay? You will not be able to include every number, all of the information. So you need to determine what is most important and how is it best to organize, and just divide those charts into their own paragraph is the best way to do that.
Exactly. In fact, if you do include every number, you cannot get higher than a 5 for task.
Right.
Okay. So definitely don't do that. All right. What is this person's task 2 question?
All right. For opinion questions, for example, to what extent do you agree/disagree, where there are two sides to a question, must we include points from both sides, or can we just fully agree or disagree in our paper? Sorry if these questions seem self explanatory, but I'd like to play it safe and clarify with the community here. I would appreciate any help and answers I can get. Wishing everyone who's taking IELTS soon the best of luck. I kind of love all of that. I love that
I
when you
know.
guys find posts in forums, it is a community, all everyone online, right? We're all trying to excel at the same exam. But then I'm envisioning whoever responds to this question, they may have some kind of idea. Maybe they're just guessing based on having taken an exam before or studying. But how would you really know if who to trust? And you might get several different answers.
Yeah, exactly. It could lead to more confusion than questions. So,
Right.
what do you think, Aubrey? If the task 2 question says, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Do we have to talk about both sides agreeing and disagreeing?
Yeah, you have two options here. You do not have to talk about both sides. You could write an opinion essay where you're just stating the side that you agree with or if you disagree. And both of your body paragraphs could provide a reason for your opinion. And then your other option is what's called an argument essay, where you provide both sides in each separate body paragraph. You have the side that you agree with and then the other side.
Yeah, but choosing option 1, writing an opinion essay, that's really risky, guys, because if the question says, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Remember that you're graded on addressing every part of that question. So if the question says agree or disagree, you do have to address both of those sides, right? Agreeing and disagreeing. You could write an opinion essay and just mention the other side in the introduction. That might be enough in order to satisfy that requirement. But if the question itself states 2 different sides, you have to fully address both sides in your essay. Okay. No matter what your opinion is. So it's always best to play it safe by writing an argument essay where you do provide main ideas and extend on those main ideas in supporting both sides.
Your other option here would be to provide a concession in your second body
Mhm.
paragraph. We've talked about that here some. You could search concession for details. But yeah, Jessica, you're right. In order to really fully address that question, the easiest thing is going to be choosing that argument essay.
All right, Aubrey, we have one more question today. Can you read that question, please?
Sure. I have the following problem. In different places on the internet, there are different tips on how a task 2 essay academic should look. For example, some say you mustn't introduce examples from personal experience, while others say it's okay. They say that's how the introduction should be structured, or that's the way you should present your arguments, while when I look at sample essays, they don't always follow it. So my question is there some true advice about this stuff? Something official? Official criteria for examiners seems rather vague. I'm worried I won't know enough about the subject they're asking me to write about. I've looked at a few practice papers, and they're all subjects I feel I couldn't write well about. Ooh,
Eesh.
this is tricky.
Yeah. Okay. This is tough. So again, there's a few different questions in here,
Hmm.
but some very good points, guys. So yeah, whether or not to use personal examples in your essay, Aubrey, what do we tell students about this?
Yeah, you definitely can use personal examples. In fact, the instructions tell you to draw from your personal life. So,
Hmm.
though they don't have to be personal examples, it could be something you have read about or heard on a podcast, some kind of interesting statistic, but it can also be people you know that have been affected by the issue or yourself.
Totally, totally. So, yes, of course, you can use examples from your own life to support your ideas in task two. Just make sure you're writing about them in a formal academic way. That's all you can do, and all you have to do. Now, I love how the student observes. There's so much different information. When I look at a model essay or a sample essay, it doesn't conform to all of this advice. Yeah, of course it doesn't. Guys, there are so many possibilities for how to organize task 2 in a way the examiner will grade highly. Um and not one is there's not just one right answer, right? There's a number of different ways you could do this. So when you look at a model essay or model essays, they're not all going to be following the same template, okay? Um, so all you can do as a student is choose one template that you know you can trust and just use that. Don't try to cobble together different advice from different people. That's not a good system, right? You need one system of strategies you can trust that you know satisfies the scoring requirements for a 7 or higher, and just follow that.
Yes, absolutely. And keep in mind, there are several different types of essays you could have to write on test day. So if you are sort of looking at strategies for one type of essay, let's say an opinion essay, and then the sample essay you look at is a problem solution essay, those will be quite different. You're going to need to tackle that different. The basic structure might be the same, but also keep in mind, make sure you're comparing like to like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And then the next piece of advice they ask about, um, so they've looked at a few practice papers and they're all subjects they feel they couldn't write well about. Yeah, I totally get it. These task
Yeah.
two questions are tough, right? So how can our students feel more confident that they can write about anything?
One thing we often suggest is to brainstorm lots of different topics, right? Brainstorm 5 different topics for every essay that you write, because you do need to think about these topics ahead of time. What are your opinions? What ideas could you support? What examples would you use? And that's a skill you need to practice before you get there on test day.
Exactly, exactly. So definitely brainstorm in the way Aubrey suggested. And also just make sure you're taking in a lot of different information in English. Read the newspaper 3 or 4 days a week. Look at different sections of the newspaper. Listen to podcasts that you wouldn't normally listen to. You really do have to broaden the ideas you're taking in so you feel prepared for anything. And remember, IELTS isn't going to ask you about a specialized topic that you need specialized knowledge for. Okay. That's why, again, they do tell you to use examples from your personal life, right? Because these are just general topics that most adults have had a little experience with, right? We've heard it on the news, we've read this somewhere. So you will know enough about this topic.
And if there are things you especially love listening to podcasts about, maybe it's baking or pop culture or something that is a little more niche, you may need to take a month or 2 while studying for IELTS to broaden, right? Pick up some
Yeah.
other podcasts, read more, articles from different sources, and then you can come back when you're done with IELTS to spend time on, your hobbies, the things you want to just listen to all the time. I know I'm that way. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, this is all I want to listen to. But for
Yeah.
IELTS, you have to be exposing yourself to lots of different issues and topics.
Exactly, exactly. All right, guys. So we have one more episode in this series, and that is answering your burning speaking questions, which we will do next time. So definitely hit follow, and we'll see you then.
Awesome. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.